Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I am back with more of my recent chat with actress Debbie White, who was in The Shivaree and The Loss. So please welcome back Debbie White.
I mean, we were what? This was 1970.
Yeah, I think
five or
because
something like that.
it would have been 75, I think, when you did the Shivaree, and
Right.
76 when you
Right.
season 4 when we did the Loss.
And I have to tell you that I did a lot of shows after that, and nothing was ever as good as that. Nothing. And I had a really bad experience on Laverne and Shirley, and that was many years later. And I just did a lot of different shows, and I did pilots and recurring roles and guest stars and movies, and nothing ever came up to the joy that I had doing the Waltons. There was everything else was like good, but the Waltons was great, and it was all of you guys, and the fact that I love the show. But I also loved Laverne and Shirley, and they turned out to be really, really awful to me. So I don't know how much you want me to talk about my bad experiences, but I mean, I really after I had such a bad experience that I said, you know what, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And that's when I started to think about what else I might do in life. And nowadays, of course, you can do many things.
What was your path forward when you started looking at moving beyond just acting or acting on television?
I continued to do voice work because I was active in voice work. So I did a lot of what's called looping, and I did some cartoons and things like that. I don't have the voice for that anymore, but I had a very young, very funny voice. And while I did that, I tried to figure out what else I could do because I'd only thought of myself as an actress, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't having fun the way, I mean, like the Waltons was at the beginning, and that was the high. I mean, there were others, of course, but nothing like that. My sister said to me, well, if you don't know what you want to do, why don't you go back to school and find out what you're interested in, but don't go to just any school. Don't just go take classes. Go to a school where you kind of like can explore what your interests are, which was, I think, probably the best piece of advice I got in my adult life, because I did. I came back east and I went to Sarah Lawrence, which is an extraordinary school. And the curriculum there is really, you have to meet certain criteria, but basically is you follow your heart. And I discovered that I couldn't get enough of history. So I took every history course I could take. And fabulous courses. I mean, they just were wonderful. And then I became a public high school teacher. I mean, it's not easy to do that. And I also wanted to work with a certain population, the population in New York City that had kind of raised me, which was the Black and brown population, the underserved population. And I found myself teaching high school for almost 10 years. Hating working for the Board of Ed, loving the children, loving the school. I worked at Bronx Theater High School. We did plays, and it was a great group of people. And we've actually stayed very, very bonded. All of us, the teachers, were very close. But I did 10 years and said, can't work for the Board of Ed anymore. They micromanage you, and these exams you have to give them at the end of the year. You can't really teach them what you want to teach them. So I left and got a job as an adjunct professor of history at Hostos, which is a CUNY, a city college in the Bronx, and that's where I am now. And I teach history. I teach American history, and I love it because I can teach the history I want to teach without somebody standing over me.
I noticed in watching the two episodes pretty close together, within a week or so of each other, was the differences in your character, the choices you made and what you did with it, that I don't know that there was a specific time frame said about how long you and Bob had been married before he died. It was like the next year, so I don't know whether it was supposed to have just been a year, but I noticed it felt like right away from the time you got off the bus that there was a little difference in the maturity level of the character that throughout it. Now, granted, she was dealing with a devastating loss. And I'm just curious, choice-wise, was it something that you consciously said, well, this is later, she's been married for a year, she's grown up, or just whether you recall if it was conscious or just the way the script and the character spoke to you at the time?
Well, the script had it all there for me. It was so well conceived. But I remember thinking that, and there's one scene in particular where Bruce and I are sitting by a pond, and I say something to him like, if you kiss me now, no one will ever know. And then she flashes back on that later in the second episode. And I just remember thinking that in the first episode, everything was in front of her. Everything was good. Everything was great. Everything was magical and in front of her. And with the second episode, it was more about everything being behind her. So that, and like where to go, what to do. There's no life to live. And then there's the birth of the puppies, right? Where's it puppies? Kittens, right? Yeah. And that sense of, purpose and rejuvenation. So she leaves Walton's Mountain with what Walton's Mountain really offered everybody the most, which was a sense of love and looking forward and family and community and purposefulness. So that she arrived feeling sort of empty and she left feeling promise.
Yeah, you mentioned that scene by the lake, and I had forgotten about that struggle that you and Richard, John Boy and Olivia have, that ends up with him pushing you into the pond. And I've talked a lot with the viewers about shooting things like that and how it kind of has to be one take. You don't want to have to dry everybody off and start all over.
No. Yeah.
Another thing I noticed there was when you came out, there was a rip in your dress, and I was wondering if you remember whether that was something that happened accidentally.
That was an accident. That was accidental.
It seemed like, because you were kind of trying, like you seemed a little surprised, like, oh my goodness, my leg is like exposed. Like you were playing the scene and you were busy, trying to not have it be a wardrobe malfunction. Right.
Yeah, and they didn't stop. They kept going. So I figured, well, okay, I guess it's all right. I mean, you just deal with what comes up, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And something that I don't think people think about. And there have been scenes where we've talked about the things that happen where actors are just sort of used to, you don't stop because something happened, unless it literally stops the scene. But otherwise, that we keep going, and how lovely some of those accidents are and how real they make everything seem. But I also seem to remember that pond was never very warm.
It was never very warm. No. And it wasn't very,
clean.
It was clean. And it was on the back lot someplace. And, they dress around it, and then the pond itself was pretty muddy and whatever. And you just, hey, I'm an actress. I have to do what I'm supposed to do. But I do remember the other Walton story. You reminded me. There's a last scene. I'm not exactly sure how it went. It's been a while since I've looked at that episode, but they send me off. Everybody sends me off with love and kisses. I think it's at the front of the house. I don't think I get on the bus or anything. Right. I don't remember. And there was one take where Ralph hugged me, and whispered in my ear, and whatever you do, if you get married again, don't kill this one too. I had to do everything I could to not laugh. I just was, he had such a funny sense of humor.
Yeah.
I forget how he dies, but in a car
I think it was
accident.
a car accident.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think is what they said.
yeah.
Um,
I was just so moved that Earl Hamner or anybody else would say, "Hey, we want to do a show about death and dying and life, going on." And they chose my character. There were other characters that had been on the show, but they chose mine to go through to have this lesson, whatever the lesson was they wanted. And I've never forgotten that. I was really touched by it. Still am.
Yeah.
Oh, another Walton story. So
Please.
after this has nothing to do with the Walton, it has to do with me. After the show, the night the show was on the air, I walked around West Hollywood like I was about to premiere in a movie. I was like, because I knew how popular the show was. So it was like, tonight, the Waltons. And the next day, I remember walking around the neighborhood going, that was me. Did you see the Waltons last night? That was me. That was me. Yeah.
And did anyone?
No, but that's how special I felt. That's how very, very, very special I felt. And, I did other shows that were just as big. I was on other shows and nothing ever did it for me like the Waltons. Nothing ever made it as special for me as the Waltons. That was just, they were shows, they were jobs. And it wasn't just because it was my first show, because by the time I did the second show, I had already done, like a Kojak. I did a big Christmas special Kojak that should show up sometime in the next few weeks, because it always does around Christmas time. And, I did a lot and a lot of stuff, and nothing meant anything to me like the Waltons. And you guys, you were really special. Do you stay in touch with people? If you see Cammie, tell her I love her.
I will. Okay. She became a teacher.
I know. I saw that. And I was like writing to her on that Waltons page going, but
I'll put you guys in direct touch.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice. Yeah.
That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons with Deborah White. I will be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.